Hey y'all, welcome back to chapel. The last couple of weeks, we have been on the topic of intentional community and all that entails. And this week we have something new and exciting for you guys. We have a panel. So we got some of you guys' questions that you had on the topic of intentional community, and we're hoping to answer some of them and gain some wisdom and insight on the topic. Alrighty, let's get started. So our first question I have for you guys is, how can I be more intentional even with a super busy schedule? Like not being able to drive myself to and from a friend's house or a Bible study or whatever that entails. How do you be more intentional with the busy schedule?
I'll jump in and get us. Hey, how you doing? I'll jump in and get us started with this. Great question. I think that is at the heart of everybody's wrestling with trying to be intentional in community. Is how do you kind of work that in with everything that's going on? Just for as you guys are looking towards later in your life and whatnot, your schedule doesn't get lighter necessarily, right? I think we're on the other side of having family and work and all that stuff, and it gets busier. And I would say, here's the thing about being intentional in community and trying to fit it into your schedule. It's less about trying to carve out, okay, this is the time I'm going to be intentional, and it's more, how do I be intentional in the moments that I'm already in with people, right? So it's not okay, by a group of friends, I'm gonna this weekend on Saturday at 5 o'clock, we're gonna be intentional together. It's more of, hey, when I see my friend in the hallway, when I do have a moment at lunch with the person next to me, when I'm at my practice for sports or band, I'm just going to take a moment to ask an intentional question. There we go. Just to kind of get a feel for how the person is actually doing. So I would encourage you, you don't have to think about intentional community as being this thing that you have to create time in your schedule to be, but more, how do I be intentional with the time that I already have with people? So that'd be kind of my take on it.
I love that whole idea of not necessarily forcing intentional community, but just observing when you have the chance and then go for it. Yeah. I love that. All right, next question. How can I be more intentional in a non-Christian environment? It's a deep question. Take all the time you guys need.
I'll hop in on this one. So honestly, in a lot of ways, it works the same way as being intentional in your Christian community. I'd say kind of the first thing is finding your first step. Sometimes for me, it's just I haven't seen this person before, I'm going to say hi. But I think part of the problem is sometimes we get really content with that first step being the last step. We're cool, I've said hi to the person, that's my thing. Every day, I'm the hi guy. That doesn't come across right. That did not sound right.
That sound right.
Don't do drugs.
He's the guy who says hello.
Yeah, he's the person who greets everyone. They're the greeter, like Walmart. Yeah. But taking that next step, quitting your drug addiction, and moving to the point of being okay, now I'm going to get to know a detail about that person. I'm going to develop a relationship, and it's incremental. I think sometimes we get into this attitude of it's either I stay at this place of saying hello to them every day, or I have to know them deeply and invite them to my house for dinner. And really, no relationship develops without kind of those steps. So taking the time to be hey, how's it going? And then ask them kind of a follow-up question and start building from there. I mean, Scott, that's our relationship. That's how that started, right? I was his TA.
That's true. And I would say you don't always have to, whenever, there's a couple different ways you can go about, being in maybe a non-Christian community or environment. And one of the things about being intentional is just showing up for people. It's being present. It's letting them know that you do actually care about them as a person, and you don't have some hidden agenda behind what you're trying to do there.
That's what I was going to say, is just loving people, and not okay, nobody wants to be a project, no one wants to be somebody else's project. So if you're getting in community with non-Christians and your intention is to go fix their issues or, that's not, people are going to feel that. And so I think just loving people and just looking for opportunities to get to know them, to love them, to show kindness to them, and just really, that's what Jesus did. He loved people.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had non-Christian friends express that sentiment to me before. I remember one of my friends, Michaela, was telling me the story of being on a plane with some guy and him approaching her with this attitude of like, I would regret it forever if I didn't say something about Jesus to you and you went to hell. But it wasn't from the perspective of like, I care about you and I want you to be saved. It was from the perspective of like, I'm not filling out my Christian punch card by doing this. And people notice those things. You would notice those things. So approaching people from a place of humanity, like we all are people, we all understand what it feels like when somebody pities you versus when somebody cares about you. And they're two different things.
Dude, I love that. Like the whole idea of just showing love, like you said, just caring, showing that friendship first as a first step, rather than being like, you're my project, I'm going to save you, like I'm a Christian. Like, not necessarily come across as that forward, just be a friend and be loving. I love that. All right, moving on, we have another question from the student body. It is, what do you do when you want to show up and have intentional community with someone, but they don't want to talk or grow?
How you feeling about that, Maya? She giggles. Have you experienced that yourself? Like, have you been in those situations?
Yeah, I have. That's a hard one because it's not like you want to force someone to talk to you or make them uncomfortable, but I also think it's okay to kind of like accept that uncomfortability and not take it personally as like, they don't want to talk to me. But I think the first step, kind of like Lydia was saying, just a loving first, and then you can build relationships, and then you can ask questions and grow deeper. And I think usually people open up to love first. And I think everyone wants to feel accepted and loved and cared for and heard. So if you start that first, I think they almost always open up to you eventually. And if not, that's okay.
No, absolutely, it is okay. And I think there's a lot of reasons why people won't open up to you, and you don't know why that is. And I don't think it's fair for you to assume why they're not opening up to you. And I would say, like, one of the things that I've found is you just keep showing up. You just keep offering yourself. And I know that that's a little bit of a risk when you're trying to find community to be vulnerable with and to do that. And eventually you will find that. But for the people that you do life with, that you're friends with, and they're just, I may be wrong. This might be like a bad assumption, but I feel like we talked about this in men prep class a little bit. I do feel like guys struggle with this probably more than the ladies do in terms of just having the safe space to say like, hey, I'm struggling right now with something. I think guys just kind of tend to be in that like, well, I think one of the things, I don't know, you mentioned to me in that, you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Nelson?
So like, I guess some of the question is like, if they don't want to talk or grow, and I can say from like personal experience as a guy going through a storm or a hard season of life, it's difficult for me to like open up and want to talk about my problems because like I'm a guy, what I'm going through is not that big of a deal. I should be able to handle it. It's somewhat of a pride thing, a little bit, but it's also like a responsibility that we give ourselves of like, I can handle this. Like I should be able to get a grip and like take control. And I feel like that's some of the problem is like, we need to let go of that control we want and like let others help. And I feel like that would definitely help in the intentional community.
Yeah, I kind of have like an example that I just think gives the point across. But my best friend, she lost her mom this year. And so she's going through grief and the loss of her mom. And that's really hard as a friend to help support her. But I'm just always like texting her, like sending her like a care package with like snacks, and she doesn't really, want to talk or be open, just because people grieve in different ways. But she has said, like looking back, like she was so thankful for just the text saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you," and just being there, that does make a huge impact for people.
I just want to tag on that because I remember, when I was in high school going through a few friendships that kind of fell apart in high school because we just kind of went separate ways. I started, my relationship with the Lord got strong, and I just wanted different things. And anyways, just thinking through some of those relationships, some of them I did well and some of them I didn't do well as far as still being there for someone. Because there was a lot of times, I'm thinking of this one particular friend who she just was choosing like really, really bad things for her life, and it was so hard to watch. And yet I still felt such a love and a deep desire to connect with her. So I kept reaching out to the point where I maybe sometimes felt like I was being annoying, but I wasn't trying to change her. I wasn't trying to tell her what to do, just to be there for her. And it's so cool how like the Lord had, like, our relationship is restored now, like 10 years later, like after high school, like we reconnected, and she was like, man, it was so nice that you were there for me. Like, and I remember like those letters that you'd send me, or, those notes or whatever. We didn't text so much then, but, and just realizing you may not know, what those seeds that you're planting, might do later. So just being in that place of being open and obedient to what you feel like the Lord is telling you to do.
I want to, just like a couple pieces of advice. When somebody is, because you just heard kind of two different examples of people going through two different things. When somebody's going through something difficult, like a loss of a family member, somebody close to them, they're going through a hard season of life. One of the things that I've learned is answers to why they're facing that difficulty is not helpful usually, right? Like, and the fact that and I'm not saying this like you, I'm just saying even me, like the fact that I would think that I have the answer to why they're facing this hardship is kind of even prideful, I would say. The best thing you can do when somebody is going through a difficult time is just let them know that you're there for them. It's like what Maya just said, hey, I'm praying for you. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. I'm here, but not try to, hey, I think this is why this is happening, or like, hey, God has a plan for this. And yes, God may have a plan in that, but it's not helpful in the grieving process. It can actually stir up bitterness. Now, the other side of it, though, is Ms. Rowe just shared, hey, there was a friend that was kind of making some decisions or going in a way that maybe was dangerous or you felt was not helpful or healthy for her. And that may be a little bit different. And it's still maybe not so much of like, you need to do this, but hey, I love you, I care about you, I think what's happening in your life may be harmful or hurtful, and I just don't want to see that it happen to you. And just to show up that way, just to let them know that, like, that's, I think, where, we can love people, but still say, like, hey, you're going in a direction that just doesn't look like it's going in a good or a healthy direction for you personally. But just notice the difference between some of the things that you may need to show up for somebody, even when they don't seem like they want you to be there. They probably do more than you think.
Right. I think, and maybe this is repetitive, but like people don't want you to fix them. People don't want you to be the person who's like, cool, I'm going to hop into your situation and I'm going to make some choices and I'm going to like, whatever it takes to make this problem go away, I'm going to fix it. And we like that because it makes us feel like we're doing something, like we're able to help. It makes us feel useful. What people need most of the time is somebody who will listen. What they need is somebody who will make them feel heard and feel seen, because that's what's important. That's what showing up and loving looks like, and that's what being intentional looks like, is recognizing and keeping your eyes open to the world around you. Seeing the people who are in your life and the people who aren't, the people who are sitting afar off from you, and observing the way that they're living their life, and reaching in and saying, I'm here for you, I see you. And for the people that you do know, saying, I see you, I know who you are, and I love you anyway. That is all what's going to make the difference.
I agree. I love that whole idea of just being like the calm, cool person that's there to listen, not to fix. That's super crucial. And also at the same time, like the opposite side, like when you want to reach out and help, but you get rejection and you get shut down and no one wants to talk to you about their problems. That's not a personal thing at all. Like, I've been there, I'm sure some of you guys have been there, when you legit try to help people, but they just don't want that help and they don't want to talk to you. That's not a personal thing. As you were saying, like, it's all part of the plan. Like, it very well could be all that, the little bit of effort that you put in to try and talk to someone could help in some way that you don't even see, and that could all be part of the plan. So if you get rejected or feel down because like people don't want to talk about their problems with you, it's not a personal thing. It could just be the season of life that they're in. Alrighty, so moving on.
Real quick on that one, though. I will say one pause may be, are you trustworthy? Are you a safe space? Because you know that about each other. You know, like, man, I know if I tell this person, there's a good chance this stuff's going to, it's going to blow up in my face. And that could be, not saying it is, but it is a time that you can pause and say, well, I'm not going to take it personally. I don't know if it's why they're not wanting to open up. It's probably because they just are not in a space to do that. But am I making myself a trustworthy, safe place for people to be open when they're ready for that? So just as a pause, like you, personal reflection, that's a good little check time for you.
For sure.
Can I just say something real quick on that too? I feel like it's important that you understand relationship is a two-way. Yeah. It's two ways, and for some of us, it's a lot easier to want someone else to open up to us, but we were not about to open up to them, and people feel that, so it's vulnerability and that opening up to each other. It's got to go both ways, and of course, you have to be a safe space for that to happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the next question we have is, it can be difficult to show intentionality when students are limited to the halls and the seats that they sit at in class and the exact same lunch table every single period. How do you show up in those situations when it doesn't necessarily feel like the right time because you're just at school or you're just at lunch?
I'm going to break. This has been something on my mind lately, the story. But I'm going to bring like the Good Samaritan piece to this. And it just, I don't know why it just clicked with me here. But Jesus is being asked by a teacher of the law, how do I inherit eternal life? Jesus' response to that is love God and love your neighbor. Short answer, right? Love God and love your neighbor. And his response to that is, well, who is my neighbor? He wants to know, like, okay, who do I need to love? And he tells the Good Samaritan story. I hope you guys are very familiar with that story. But at the end, the point of that story and the point that Jesus makes is he asks who was being a neighbor in the story, right? Who is choosing to love the person that was just right in front of them. It's not who is your neighbor, but are you going to be the type of person who loves? Are you going to be the neighbor? And I think that is, at the heart of even that question is, I know you're like with the same people, but are you loving? Are you being the neighbor to the people that you are, for lack of a better word, stuck with throughout the course of the day? Because I imagine, you're with people, but you don't necessarily spend time to get to know them and be intentional with even just the people that are there with you. So I think that's part of this is take the time to get to know someone new. Take the time to even though you might have sat next to them for the whole year, you still may not know them. And you probably don't know most of what's going on in their life. It's a really great time to be intentional there.
I was wondering, Maya, you're like the student up here. Do you experience that?
Yeah. So, in junior high, I probably just went through my day like to do schoolwork, eat lunch, and then I was excited to go to my after-school activities. But I think the really amazing thing that I learned in high school is just how much I really love people. And you have an opportunity to sit next to someone different in like 7 or 8 periods. Of course, you have your small friend group, but in math class, you sit next to someone. In science class, you're sitting next to a different person. And we may think like, oh, I don't have time to have these conversations or to put in that effort, but I think we do have a lot more time than we realize. For me, I realize that if I'm spending time with my friends, the amount of time that I pick up my phone at lunch and I'm like, wow, we've been sitting here for 5 minutes. We could really be talking about something, or the beginning of class. It doesn't have to be, a 20-minute period set out. There's a lot of time in the day to make intentional.
I would agree. And also I like during those lunch periods or science or math or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be like a super deep conversation. It could just be like, hey, like, how's your day going? Like, what sports have you been watching? It could be anything, very simple and sweet, just to show that you care and that you want to be friends.
I was going to piggyback on that just very simple, intentional act of putting your phone down or leaving it in your locker when you go to lunch. I just had lunch duty last week in the junior high when you guys, and I'm someone who observes and I notice things, and yeah, I mean, like, it's just a lot of you, when you're sitting there having lunch, you have your phone out, and I get it, and I'm not trying to judge in any way, but I'm just saying, you're asking how you can have intentional community, in these moments at school when it's so busy and you're sitting next to these same people, and I'm like, man, even just one day, like, put your phone down and like look around, like, who's next to you, who have you talked to, like, observe who else has their phones out, or it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I would say, I think this sort of goes to this point and to like our very first point, talking about like scheduling, and we're busy people. I think we may be some of the busiest people we've ever been as a culture. I don't think anybody has ever been in this mindset of busyness the way that we have in 2021. And sometimes just setting aside time specifically for people, right? For me, one of those people is my little brother who lives in Florida. And it's very easy for us to go weeks and weeks and weeks and months without talking to each other because he's, busy with his girlfriend and with his job and with a million other things, and I'm busy working with my girlfriend and like a billion other things, and it's easy to lose touch with people.
The girlfriend
every time.
We know, Tim.
Okay. So it's really easy to kind of lose track of time with the people around you. And so sometimes taking that intentional step of scheduling, I don't want you guys to get the idea that like scheduling always has to be a bad thing, but like setting those small goals of, okay, this time is just for him. And so like once a month, I make it a goal, I'm gonna reach out and I'm gonna call. He can pick up, he cannot pick up, I'll call him like a few times until I get him. And like once a month, that's always my thing. So I think choosing to find little ways that you can start reaching out to the people that you don't see is also pretty important.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so moving on from that like whole theme of a busy schedule, we have another question. It's like, and I know that some of you guys have gone through seasons of life or storms that are very challenging, and you as the students have too. The question is, how can we pursue intentional community during this crazy time? And in parentheses, it's COVID, but it doesn't have to be COVID. It could be a death in the family, a loss, or a hard time that you're just struggling with. So how, during those seasons of life, do you still pursue intentional community?
I think, to me at least, I'm an introvert, and so sometimes intentional community sounds like a job or a chore to me. Just like another thing on my list or another thing to add to, and I just feel so tired and like my social battery is drained. But I think I learned, especially this past year, is that when you create intentional community and you have that support, it's not a chore, and it like does support me through those things. And it was just like a complete like mind change, because I always thought of community and intentionality as a chore, and it's really not, has been one of my greatest blessings, and I wish I would have learned it in junior high, because junior high's rough and high school's rough, and yeah.
No, I love that you brought in just your personality, the introverted side of things. I don't know if you guys have heard those terms, introvert and extrovert. The introvert's kind of somebody who is a little bit more withdrawn. Extrovert is somebody who like puts themselves out there pretty easily. And I would say, like, just a clarification with those two things, it's really what energizes you. So you actually, as an introvert, you actually get energized by kind of withdrawing. You need some alone time. That's what kind of recharges your batteries. So that's where like a source of energy. Likewise, if she goes out and is with a lot of people, probably the more people you're with, the more like that's actually like draining your battery, right? I'm an extrovert, so like I can go out there and I'm like, this energizes me. Being in front of people, is this draining you right now? Just being on?
I don't feel drained right now.
Okay, good. That's awesome. I like
Just wait.
This growth, right?
I know.
But like It's not that you are only energized or drained by being with people or being alone. It's both. It's just you primarily, you may have a preference or a way that's more easily charging for you. And I would just say, recognize that about yourself. Recognize that, like in times where I think community, going back to your question, community in those hard times is the most important time to seek it out and be intentional with it. Because you need it. Oftentimes, those are the times that you can feel the most alone in carrying the burdens that you have. But no, if you're introverted and you're kind of like, that's scary and that's draining for you, you were created for community. It's not that like, well, I may or may not need it. Like, God created you to be with people and to be with Him. And so you're created. It's just understanding, okay, I know that I need this in my life. I need that source of community here. But I also know that I need to be in a spot where I can be energized and charged up. And sometimes that may mean withdrawing for periods of time. And just recognizing that about yourself is really helpful to know, like, okay, I've been with people all week long. This weekend, I'm just going to chill at home and read a book and relax and enjoy my time so I can be charged up and get back in community and feel energized again.
And that's super important to like know what drains you and what energizes you, so you can have a healthy balance of both and hopefully grow in that community better. So the next question we have is, how do you intentionally get to know God?
How do you intentionally get to know anyone, I guess would be the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
It's time spent. And I know that's difficult because part of that's just trying to learn to listen to the voice of God. And I know you guys here, it's like read scripture, worship, spend time in prayer, spend time in community. You actually get to know God in that. And I know those are like, I think the difficulty is like, well, I'm doing that and I don't know that I'm necessarily growing or not growing. And I think that's what makes it hard about those kinds of answers is like, well, I've read the Bible, but like, I don't know if I'm growing more intimately. And it just, like any relationship, it takes time. It takes time. Keep pursuing that. Keep pushing into those moments. When you have an amazing opportunity to spend time in worship every week, here, and if you're a youth group or church and you guys do that, you have amazing opportunities to be around people that are teaching scripture and in that trying to teach you about God. And then I think the real key, the thing that really changed for me is when I got intentional about being in quiet time, just in prayer, and just stopping myself enough to try to begin listening to God's voice in my life. And it's not like, it didn't happen right away. It took time. But over time, I got to learn to listen to God's voice. And that's where like intimacy, then intentionality with that really shifted.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think it's absolutely not just like, oh, I'm setting aside X amount of time to be with God. I'm reading this many chapters a day and I'm praying this many minutes a day. It's also just like, how are you spending that time, right? For me, it's easy to set a timer and be like, okay, I'm going to pray for 5 minutes today. I'm going to sit here in the stillness and pray. And my prayers are very disconnected from my thoughts. There are words coming out of my mouth, but my brain is elsewhere. I'm running through lists of things that I have to do that day, and I'm thinking about situations that I'm in, and all of that kind of stuff. But really, it is like being in relationship with anyone where you have to be present with them. And so kind of drawing yourself back to that place of, am I being present with God? Am I giving Him my attention, and am I speaking directly to Him, or am I speaking at Him? I think that's kind of a big game changer.
One of the things that I love to do, and that I've grown so much closer in my relationship with the Lord, is it's asking Him questions. God, what do you think about this? What do you think about me? God, how do you see this person? What do you want to do right now? Like what, if I see a picture, I'm like, well, what's that? Just realizing, man, you can ask Him questions and he's going to speak to you. So.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that's all the time we have for these questions. So I appreciate you guys getting these questions out to us so we could maybe gain some insight and wisdom on them. If there are other questions that maybe we didn't address, you guys can listen to the podcast, which will be out sometime soon. And that'll discuss more on this topic of intentional community.
Or just come ask us. I like to talk to people.
That too, that is
Community,
another great
guys.
way. Exactly.
Just come up to me in the hallway. I know I'm tall and people say I have a mean face, but I like talking to people.
It's not true, it's not true.
It's not.
All right, well, that's all
Sometimes.
the time we have. So thank you guys for coming out and listening to what these guys have to say about this topic. You are dismissed. Thank you.